Welcome to the CS20 Case, which celebrates the 20th anniversary of the game. Check the timecodes in this video's description, and comment section for mobile users. The Mag 7 Popdog by Appel and Mad Polygon was meant to reference Train. They decided on Popdog as a recognisable icon for this, being the company that originally made the map. As an Easter egg, you can see the writing "Where is Popdog" inscribed on the magazine, but only at certain wear levels. For some reason, people think that this is a sci-fi skin, when in fact it's meant to be a grimy, worn exterior of an old train carriage. Mad Polygon worked on the 3D model to get the normal map and baking data, and Appel focused on the illustration and texturing. He likes how it turned out. Appel says that he spent 4 solid months working on this competition, his flagship being this AK-47 design, filled with references and Easter eggs back to Half-Life. He made a number of skins though, some during a trip to Iceland, where he'd spend every night in the hotel busily working away on them. You can check out his Instagram in this video's description. Now the SCAR-20 Assault by G99 Factory, and with thanks to Appel for his collaboration on the Assault collection. It started with the P90 design, being based on a crate from the Assault map from CS1.6. This style works well with big, boxy weapons which have plenty of empty space to decorate with the ridged container look. However, problems soon occurred wherever the shape of the weapons deviated from this. It required some thought and imagination to disguise it all as features that you'd find on a crate. As an example, that long cylindrical metal bit running along the middle started life on the P90 design to disguise a joint on the weapon, but later became a recurring feature in the collection, even on this SCAR-20 design where it's no longer needed for its original purpose. The Tech 9 Flashout by Multihawk is, you guessed it, supposed to imitate a flashbang. He chose to keep the magazine and lower half of the receiver simple and to focus on the parts that he can make look like a grenade. The biggest challenge he faced was in overcoming the black, shadowy fade it gets towards the end of the barrel. This area started off red and yellow, but it was ruined by this baked-in lighting, so it was instead moved to the bolt, which he thinks works better. He still prefers how his previous PP Bison's Smoke 'em Out skin turned out, which is the same but for a smoke grenade. But as always, he's extremely happy to have his design accepted, and would like to give a huge thanks to Valve for selecting his skins. He started his skin making journey over 6 years ago, and doesn't see an end in sight anytime soon. The Mac 10 Classic crate is inspired by the crates on Dust 2, which Kai123 focused on because he considers them memorable, setting themselves apart from the rest of the map. Plus he really likes the way they look. He started with the Mag 7 design, but after having finished that, he thought that it might suit the Mac 10 even better. This wouldn't have happened had the competition deadline not been extended. With this extra time, he also realised that the design could be improved to make it look more like the crates it was based on. One such improvement being to turn the design the other way, since he realised he had done the crate look upside down originally. He also realised that there were more parts of the gun that he could be decorating, so he moved the yellow stripes to the bottom to leave more space for the main part. He says my upscaled Dust 2 video helped to inspire the details, which eventually made it to his own design. As finishing touches, bomb icons were added, as well as the kind of writing you'd find on shipping containers. I'll let you work out what they all mean, but let's just say they're dates associated with Counter-Strike's past. Dualies Elite 1.6, also by G99 Factory, are inspired by the original Dualies from the old Counter-Strike, but improved with the addition of a normal map and gunsmith finish. He says the low-resolution textures of the original gave his imagination plenty of room to work with, but he was careful not to overdo it by making them look overly flashy or elaborate. This still had to be a realistic looking weapon after all. The normal map was used to smooth some of the sharp corners of the design, and to add some details which were only previously present on the real weapon. He wanted a dark coloured finish, taking a while to decide between blue and black, before adding red accents, which were there in the originals as well. Given the huge number of reskins in this competition, he thinks he was very lucky to get his included, and says that he loves the clicking sound that these weapons made back in 1.6. He asks, is he the only one? The FAMAS Decommissioned, also by Kai123, has a nuke-y theme, which he chose because he liked that map's colour scheme, as well as the references and assets from the original Half-Life itself. He originally called it Nuclear Tension, in reference to the Half-Life level Surface Tension, where most of the nuke assets were taken from in the first place. He used the light blue metal walls as the base colour of this design, partly because of all the interesting dirt and rust that they had on them. The grip is the metal floor leading to B. The top was originally green, but he decided it was too much colour, so settled for grey. By chance, he aligned the textures incorrectly, but liked the 3D look that it gave the weapon, so he elaborated on it to make the red bit look even more 3D, where it joins with the grey metal running along the edge of the gun. He had to make the wood texture from scratch, which he made using Photoshop. Again, the way it faces different directions at the front and at the back was accidental, but he liked it so he kept it. And then, to detail the front, he chose the corrugated metal look and also accidentally misaligned that as well, but that too resulted in a cool 3D look, so he kept that too. His favourite bit is the light at the back. He's always been a bit unsure what that bit of the weapon was supposed to do, so why not make it a light? He gave the surrounding area a glow as though being lit up by the light itself. This was quite challenging to do, since all he had at his disposal was Photoshop. He had to battle against baked-in ambient occlusion and the limitations of the software he was using, but is happy with how it turned out. He submitted 2 versions of the FAMAS, one with the Black Mesa logo and one without, and he enjoyed it so much that he has started on a V2 for the weapon, which you can see here in its current state. He has written a guide on Steam to show his technique for getting rid of logos and text that are built into the weapons, which he hopes might be useful for others. Unfortunately, it's been buried by downvote bots, but it may help some other skin makers out there. Link to it is in the description. The Glock sacrifice by Multi-Hawk and Silent shows an epic battle from Counter-Strike's history, where Olaf Meister defused the bomb in a fire to win the round just before he succumbed to the flames. It was in the semi-finals of a major hosted at ESL1 Cologne, and his sacrifice helped win them the round, then the map, beating Dignitas, before being knocked out by Nip in the finals. On the back of the gun it says "Tick Tock, Tick Tock" to represent the urgency of the situation. The blue part of the gun represents the CTs, and the front is orange for the terrorists. This bit also shows the gun battle that took place. Black is used to divide the 2 teams. This skin started life as a metal texture with white graffiti on it. After a few days, more colours were chosen to better represent the scene. A lot of early text on the design was later removed to make it look more neutral. Normal maps were used to make the weapon appear rough and used, though Silent believes that Valve may have toned the effect down slightly. He'd like to thank them for selecting his design. The M249 Aztec by Sparkwire is based on one of his favourite maps from 1.6. He also felt it had the potential for iconic art that people would instantly associate with it. He wanted for it to feel as though it had been pulled out of some Aztec ruins and had a few modern bits of hardware strapped to it, which is why some parts of this design retain the original textures. It also helped to draw the eyes to the bits that had changed, as well as helping it to not look too overdone. He also thought that limiting the decorated parts would help lower its rarity level. This design was sculpted in ZBrush, then baked to low poly and textured. It took him 40 hours over 2.5 weekends to make this skin. He has been making skins for years, but this CS20 competition is the first time any have ever been included. He's definitely going to produce more skins in the future with more unique themes and effects. He already has a selection of different designs on his workshop. He'd love to thank Valve and the community for accepting his work. The 5.7 Buddy was made by Freddy and his friend Kruger. The terrifying duo wanted to create something original and interesting and spontaneously came up with the idea of a CT's head, and noticed it nicely fitted the back of the 5.7, and the sight looked a bit like night vision goggles. They then got to work making it, and are incredibly pleased with the result, and the reaction that it received from the Counter-Strike community. They would like to thank all of you, and Valve, for supporting them with their work. As for their names, they said it was a bit of fun, and yes, they really are 2 people. The P250 Inferno by Shrike and Sparkwire was a skin they finished at the very last moment before the deadline. With it, they hoped to capture the warm, inviting look of the new Inferno, with the ivy as a highlight and complementary colour. Some of the skins they worked on for this competition took 100 or more iterations before they were happy with them, but this one worked first time. Shrike was surprised that this one was the one that got accepted, when so much more time had been spent on the others. They used some clever techniques to get the 3D effect, but would like to keep how they did it a secret for now. They believe there's a lot of potential for all kinds of crazy ideas with how they've done it, even when limited to very low poly weapon models. You can see here how their technique subtly smooths off the edges of the weapon on the normal map, effectively changing the shape of the weapon in all but the polygons. There was also an intended boiler Easter egg on the back of the firing pin, but sadly with the weapon finish this design required, it became invisible on the final model. The UMP-45 Plastique was one of Graf's first skin ideas when he started making them back in 2016. He drew the concept, but put it on hold because he didn't think he was good enough to be able to pull it off at the time. Plus, normal maps weren't even supported back then. But in 2018 he returned to it, gathered a lot of references, and started painting over his old concept in 3D coat. He focused on making it look best from the player's perspective. The bomb model he used is a little different from the one that's in the game, because at the time there were whispers of a possible HD remake for the C4 design, so he used his imagination a bit when designing it. Most of the 3D work was done in 3ds Max, but the tapes and charges were done in ZBrush. He then baked all of the maps needed for the texturing and sent it all to Substance Painter. The CS20 competition was announced 6 months after it was published to the workshop, and he was all like, how about that? Since his design was perfect for it. He also worked on some others for the competition, including this XM1014 skin inspired by Half-Life, where he has elaborated on his 3D techniques further. The MP5 Agent by Axarov is one of several he submitted for the competition, but is the one that he invested the most time and love into. He has only been making skins for CSGO since December 2018, and he started with very little experience in the field, and it felt amazing for his work to be appreciated so soon by Valve. The P90 Nostalgia was made by Den Star Skate and Appel, who told me the idea of recreating the original and famous character from CS 1.6's main menu came during a discussion he was having with his friend about the game. They wanted to be able to bring this little segment of history into the modern day, and this skin competition seemed like the ideal place to do it. He chose a graffiti style for the artwork to allow it to be portrayed in a more natural, painted-on kind of way. Appel and Den Star Skate took in turns to decorate and to polish this skin. One day he just happened to be watching the music video for Green Day's Boulevard of Broken Dreams for the first time. He soon realised he had given the CT the same kind of eye makeup. When asking for feedback on this design, some people suggested that this eyeliner should be removed, but ultimately he's pleased he kept it in as it makes this skin more personal to him and his own style. And for all you Assault fans out there, he would like for you to see this to feel the nostalgia even more. This is the MP9 Hydra by Frostbite. The idea for this skin came to him when he was working on his FAMAS Monarch V2, another skin he developed for CS20. But while that was inspired by a pin for a map, the MP9 is inspired by a pin for Operation Hydra. He had a strong vision for how it should look in his head, but felt it was hard to ask for feedback from others during the early stages, since this idea doesn't look too appealing until the details have been added. This was intended to be a one-off design, but he ended up making a collection out of it since he felt that the design also works well on the Scar 20. He provided me with old mock-ups too. This was the original idea, and here's another early version which another skin artist, Con3, suggested. He says it was hard to get the environment map to appear just the right brightness, so as a result he thinks the front of the weapon can look a little washed out if inspected closely. The accepted version of the skin was V2 of the design, which has some added light wear to the scales and the snakes to make them look more 3D, and also a few minor fixes to the materials themselves across the design. The org Death by Puppy, original name Death by Doggy, was made by Midnight Witch, who started by taking inspiration from as many maps as possible, but she ended up liking ideas pulled from Dust 2 and Train, as well as good old Popdog, a classic reference to the game's history and to Barking Dog Studios. Having Death by Puppy also nicely complements the already included Death by Kitty skin. She made several different versions, one based on Doom Kitty, as well as others with different finishes and intended for varying rarity grades. In the end, Valve went with her anodized finish, which was more colourful than most, but still not as bright as this one. Midnight Witch is so glad and grateful to finally have something shipped in CSGO, and hopes this will be the first of many. The FAMAS Commemoration by Ezekiel. Before starting on it, he spent a good few weeks thinking about it. He really wanted to make it a skin that represented Counter-Strike as a whole. Rather than to make it about visual or famous callbacks to the series, he wanted to explore the themes of teamwork and community, which he likes to think that Counter-Strike is built on. Plus, it was a great opportunity to make a really sick-looking engraved skin. He made some quick prototypes just to make sure it would work, and found that baked normals really helped it to pop. Here is a picture of one of those early prototypes where he tested this. He started with the AUG since it had a large area suited for engravings, but ultimately chose the FAMAS since the resolution was greater, because the texture is flipped on the other side rather than simply carrying over. He has some confessions to make. He baked the normal onto the plane with the UVs, rather than the standard way. This meant he didn't need to worry so much about the shape of the gun and where the sharp angles would disrupt the effect. The crest bit took the longest to make, comprising of about 50% of the time he spent on this skin. He sketched out individual CTs, each one from a different faction and sporting a different weapon, making sure that these were all guns that had been in the game since the beginning. Being unfamiliar with sculpting, he opted for a low poly art style, then decided to have a map of the world to fit in with the name Global Offensive and the game's international community. Given the shape of the weapon, he knew that some countries were inevitably going to be excluded, but he's happy he was able to fit his home country of New Zealand in the corner, but he did cut some of the British Isles off. He has filled the weapon stock with the names of classic and modern maps. He noticed after publishing it that he missed off Vertigo, but who cares about that? As an Easter egg, at the top of the sights is engraved the writing, Teamwork and Community. It's only visible when inspecting the weapon. Ezekiel also kindly provided me with some behind-the-scenes graphs of the project from Substance Designer. Since Valve stated that they like having choices of different versions, he produced both a gold and silver edition. You can check out the other versions on the Workshop collection in the description. And last, the AWP Wildfire by Vlek. He is no stranger to the Steam Workshop, having had former inclusions in Dota 2, Team Fortress 2 and Rust. And now he's made it into CSGO as well. I have made many skin showcase videos, and something has become clear. Just because their entries have been hand-selected by Valve and featured in CSGO, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a direct line of communication with them. A lot of the time it sounds like skin makers get a notification that their entry has been included and that's it. It would almost be anticlimactic were it not for the vast amounts of publicity and money involved. I sometimes hear stories from the skin makers about how there might be something wrong with their included design, or maybe a certain layer of it isn't showing up correctly or whatever. Granted, these do tend to get fixed eventually. We saw an update the other day that rectified some with this collection. But it's becoming clear to me that many skin makers don't have a way of contacting Valve directly. Some of them even ask me if I can help, and I'm like, well, I thought you'd be in a better position to do this than I am. Anyway, I like to think that somebody at Valve watches these videos, and if so, I feel you should know that a lot of skin makers do want to reach out to you, and not all for problems. Many just want to express their thanks and gratitude for having their lives changed by your choice to include their skins. I don't know how well this is conveyed in these videos, where they ask me to thank Valve for them, but it's clear to me that some are so happy and emotional about it, and if there is some way that Valve would be okay with skin makers sending messages their way, I think many of them would appreciate it.